It's been nearly 5 years since it was first published, but I am finally getting round to reading Girl Defined's first book, also titled Girl Defined, God's Radical Design for Beauty, Femininity and Identity. This was written back before one of them was married and pregnant, when they were first getting a lot of recognition for their ridiculous videos, so it's not necessarily like up to date on their lives, but they're still teaching the same things now, so it's still relevant for us to look at and talk about and analyse and critique and so on. If you are unfamiliar with Girl Defined, they are two sisters, Kristen and Bethany. I always get them mixed up which one's which, so I'll try and put pictures on screen so you know which one I'm talking about. They started making videos on biblical womanhood and how God has designed this one way for women to be.
God created men and women to be equally valuable, but purposely different. And the reason that we're not feminists and what we're about to share with you is because feminism, at its core, feminism has tried to define womanhood on its own terms. It's not just about women's equality with men. It's about redefining womanhood altogether according to man's and women's terms, rather than how God defines our womanhood.
And I first found them probably back in like 2017-ish, back when Jacqueline Glenn made a video on them, and she reviewed one of their videos which featured basically like a bunch of men just talking to the camera, telling women how to dress and act and how to be attractive to these particular men. It was very, very bizarre.
So to me, a godly girl is a girl who loves the Lord with all her heart and wants to serve him.
I really admire a girl who is content with where God has her in life.
And after I saw that video, I looked into them a lot more, and I watched a few more of their videos, and then I found their blog, and I found an absolute ton of really like disgustingly homophobic content on their blog, which they quickly deleted after it gathered a bit of attention. It all started back in 2014 with a blog post titled The Gay Pride Movement and Their Sneaky Agenda, which is an interesting title, to say the least. By adopting the friendly term gay, we naturally downplay and minimize the depravity of that lifestyle. It makes light of something that should never be taken lightly. Following on from this, they then made even more offensive videos, including one where they called a victim of sexual assault broken.
I've done things with my boyfriends in the past with and without consent. We are all sexually broken. We're all impure. We all struggle with lust. We all sin and need to repent of that sin before God.
It's different ways.
It's just in different ways.
And they've been putting out content ever since. Luckily, I think their growth seems to have like stagnated a little bit at the minute, which is all right. Let's talk about the book for now. Girl Defined's first book was published back in 2016. We are going to be reading this in the next couple of videos. Before we take a look at the book, if you are new here, it would be great if you wanted to subscribe, because I make book reviews, poetry critiques, science and history content, and I talk about lots of social issues like feminism and pro-LGBT stuff and all kinds of fun stuff like that. Plus, there are a few giggles along the way, and my dog Kyra, who's currently making her bed next to me, so thanks, Cuba. You can also find me posting quite a lot over on Instagram. My username is Rachel Oates with a 0 instead of an O, and I stream on Twitch fairly regularly as well, so follow me in those places. It's funsies. Anyway, let's jump into part 1 of the book, which we are going to be reading and reviewing today, which is called Femininity Gone Wrong. Chapter 1 is titled Bullied by the Big Bad Checklist, and the book opens with two kind of side-by-side stories of the sisters interviewing with different modelling agencies. And it's a weird, slightly pointless story. It doesn't really feel like it serves much purpose, but I don't know, maybe it's going to come back later in the book and we're going to get like an end to this story or something and it's going to be empowering. I don't know. It just feels like in the opening of the book, it doesn't serve much purpose other than to say, look, we could have been models. We're just that beautiful and wonderful and you should look up to us. But we chose not to be because we're better than the sluts that do that. So, to have a look at some little excerpts from Bethany's section, they include, I glanced around the office. My eyes were instantly drawn to the image-covered wall behind Jeff. Hundreds of pictures of female models plastered the wall from top to bottom. I scanned the photos and began noticing an unsettling theme. Every model wore an outfit a few square inches shy of nudity. Actually, outfit would be a generous term for what these girls were wearing. And then later, I was nervous about how this interview was going to turn out. Jeff kind of creeped me out. No, he really creeped me out. The last thing I wanted was for my picture to become a new addition to his wallpaper. What type of modelling are you most interested in doing? The opening question asked. My heart picked up the pace as I scanned the options. Swimsuit modelling, lingerie modelling, pro modeling or other? Is there an option E? With my hands becoming sticky, I gripped the pen and went on to the next question. So, like I say, kind of like very judgmental. And as I was saying on a Twitch stream the other night, I get that everyone's a bit judgmental sometimes. Like, I'm guilty of it. I'm sure everyone watching is guilty of it. It's kind of part of being human. And obviously we should try our best not to be, but it's kind of inevitable that everyone slips up sometimes, right? It's part of being human. That is okay. However, with Girl Defined, it feels like this entire book is just judgment after judgment about women who aren't them. It feels like the entire premise of this book is to say, look, these other women are dirty whores and we don't want to be like them. So you shouldn't want to be like them. So you should be like us. Let us show you how to be like us. It's all very much, we're not like the other girls, we're better than them. And it gets old very quickly. And this isn't just like a slip up in being judgmental. This is like calculated judginess, you know? Calculated and monetized judginess. Yeah. Now, back to the actual points about like modeling and stuff. So I don't know anything about modeling, obviously. Look at me. But I do know that there are plenty of issues in the industry as a whole, especially with like preying on young girls and teenagers and kind of using them and sexualizing them too young. And there are lots of issues like that. But I also know that there are like legitimate kind of like modeling agencies and stuff. And it's not all, I assume, not all like seedy and scummy. And it just seems to me that Bethany and Kristen have this all-round hatred towards the modeling industry as a whole, and therefore like all mainstream media as a whole, and therefore like all non-Christian people as a whole, because they had some interactions with some really sleazy sounding individuals, and they just assume that everyone who isn't Christian and like them is like this, and it's like generalizing to the extreme. In this last story, it seems like Bethany specifically went to an agency that specializes in like promo events and swimsuit modeling and that kind of thing. And then she got shocked when she was asked if she'd do that. And it feels like it's kind of more on her for going to that kind of agency than just all agencies being like that. I don't know. And then in this next story, again, it sounds like Kristen and her mother were approached by some actual predators posing as agents when she was like 12 or something. And so she's like, oh, look, all the people who were in modeling are creepy because this one predator approached me or something. I don't know. It's basically, this story doesn't sound like legit modeling to me. It sounds like some kind of weird child abuse farm. And so for her to say like, all mainstream media is like this because I got approached by this one predator just feels a bit odd. I don't know. Let me read you the story. You can tell me your thoughts. Kristen is 12 in this story and gets approached by a scout on the street because she's tall. Your long legs and blonde hair would make you great model material, she said excitedly. She introduced herself and explained that she and her husband work specifically with young models ages 10 to 16, preparing them for a career in the industry. They owned a large house in Dallas, and many of their young modeling recruits lived with them. She told us that her models worked for the biggest agencies in Dallas and were on their way to becoming top models. She asked if my mum would be interested in coming to her house to look into the opportunity. She even offered a bedroom for me and said I could live at their house if I was interested. I could tell my mum was slightly shocked and flattered by her offer. Who would be flattered by that? It's creepy. In the end, my mum kindly declined, explaining that a modelling career wasn't what she or my dad had in mind for my future. This is creepy as hell, right? This cannot be normal. Like, this is a predator, right? I'm not just misreading this. This is not normal. Or if it is normal in America, then please stop, like, immediately. It's creepy and wrong. And then they go on to complain that as they got older, their values became quite shallow and superficial. And instead of taking personal responsibility for that, they blame everyone else. They use this, see, look, society bad excuse. Looking back on our childhood always makes me and Kristen laugh. You probably laugh at yours too. We thought we were totally cool and hip when it came to our fashion choices. Although we were young and fashion illiterate, something was changing in us. Our desire to be beautiful and valued by the people around us began to form. We began to notice the beautiful faces on billboards, the sensual women on magazine covers, the perfect hair on shampoo commercials, the bone-thin models on mall posters. We noticed these things and we liked them. These images appealed to our inner desire to be beautiful, to be feminine, to be women. The prevailing secular culture enticed us with its version of femininity, its perception of romance, its idea of family, its explanation of success. Little by little, the subtle undertow of our culture's ideology shaped our views of womanhood. They go on to say that the only hope we have as women is to stop defining ourselves according to other people's standards and start defining it according to God's word. In order to become all God created you to be, you have to gain a vision for what true God-defined femininity is all about. Throughout the pages of this book, you will discover why God created the female gender, what your purpose is as a woman, how to obtain lasting worth, what true beauty looks like, how to apply femininity to your romantic relationship, what God's idea of a working woman looks like, and how to leave behind a lasting legacy that doesn't fade with time. God is looking for women like you to courageously go against the grain of modern culture. He needs women who are brave, women who will set a new trend, think outside the box, and raise the bar for femininity. So basically, we'll teach you how to be like us because it's the only acceptable way to be. That's the gist of this entire opening chapter and this entire book, to be honest. I honestly don't know how many times I'll have to say that there's no one right way to be a woman or to be feminine or to just be a person, to be yourself, to be whatever. Like, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, and it never will be. Different ways of being and expressing yourself and acting will work for different people, because different people have different needs and wants and values. I think we can generally say that most people want to be like happy and fulfilled in life, and that's a kind of goal for everyone. But what will make everyone happy and fulfilled is very, very different. And therefore, the steps that people take to get to that stage of happiness and fulfillment will be very, very different. I don't understand why this is so difficult for someone like Kristen or Bethany to understand. They just seem to think that, well, we have this idea of what happiness and fulfillment looks like. Therefore, everyone else should conform to this as well.
Because honestly, advising you, like, we can all...
But it doesn't work that way. I was actually thinking the other night of like an analogy that might like work to explain this to someone like Kristen or Bethany, and I came up with one that is hair care. They might actually understand this since they care about how they look so much, right? So I'd imagine that everyone in the world wants to feel good about their hair, right? To just feel good about it being there and not hate it. There might be some exceptions, that's fine, but on the whole, I think most people just want to feel good about it. And if they don't, that's okay. It's not your hair. Let them do what they want with theirs. That's fine. However, what will make some people feel happy with their hair isn't what's going to make other people feel happy with their hair. Some people want short hair, some people want long hair, some people want brightly coloured hair, some people want natural hair, some people want hair with lots of styling, some people want hair that's just easy to deal with, that they can just like forget about day to day. For some people, being happy with their hair will just mean it being clean. For some people, it will mean it looking good. For some people, it will mean it being easy to manage. For others, it'll mean that, you know, it looks like they put a lot of time and effort and care into their hair. What will make people happy with their own hair will be different for everyone. And generally, once a person achieves what they want to with their hair, they'll be happy with their hair, right? But not every hairstyle will make every person happy. A hairstyle that looks great on one person might look awful on another. Once we've established that everyone has different hair goals and different things that they want to achieve with their hair and different things that will make them happy with their hair, we have to realize that in order to achieve your personal hair goals, you need to do different things to your hair. You need to style it in a different way. You need to cut it in a different way. You need to use different products. You need different shampoo, for example. A shampoo that works great for one person might be awful for another. So a shampoo that is great for that person over there might dry out my hair. The shampoo that I use might give that person over there a dry, itchy scalp. While I might prioritize shampoos and hair care product that work with hydration and keeping my hair like nourished like that, other people might want to focus on maintaining colour and dye for longer. Other people might want to concentrate on a shampoo or products that enhance their natural hair texture, all these different things. Because we all want different outcomes for our hair, we all need to use different products and different steps to get there, to achieve the outcome. We all use different tools to achieve the ultimate goal of just being happy with our hair. And then you also have to take into account people's circumstances as well. Not everyone is lucky enough to be able to afford the best shampoo for them. Not everyone has the time to put into styling their hair the way they might dream about. Not everyone has the skill to pull off certain techniques. Not everyone's natural hair texture can support a certain hairstyle that they might want. These are all things we have to think about and compromise on in the real world. And it's the same when it comes to kind of like real life stuff and our real goals. Ultimately, everyone might want to just be like happy with life, but this image of what makes us happy with life might be different for everyone else, and the steps that we take to get there might be different for different people. And even if you have this ideal plan in your mind of, okay, well, these things would make me happy, and I get here by doing this and this and this, not everyone has the ability to do those things, so you kind of have to compromise a little bit, because maybe they don't have the education, they don't have the money, they're not in the right circumstances. There's any number of things. Just like hair care isn't one size fits all, it's the same with most aspects of our life, and that includes being happy and fulfilled. Being a woman, being a person, being you, being human, living isn't one size fits all, and the sooner people like Girl Defined realize that, the better. All that said, surprisingly, there are a few small positive sections of this book. For example, they have these like little exercise pages in which they give the reader like questions to think about and little things to fill in. And some of them actually get the reader to really start thinking introspectively and consider different aspects of their life. And there are some really good questions in here. For example, these bits are like, what are your biggest insecurities right now? What do you think will bring you lasting worth and satisfaction? Points like these are really important for people to think about, and they're actually quite good parts of the book. I think it's great. It's just a bit annoying because, for example, with this last question of what do you think will bring you lasting worth and satisfaction, that would be a great thing to ask people if your next step is, okay, great, so let's figure out how you achieve that. But in this case, Girl Defined's next steps are to say, actually, are you sure about that? Because we know better. Let's change your mind. And that's what's frustrating. They're taking something good and they're ruining it. Moving on to chapter 2, it is called Blonde Bombshells Don't Have What It Takes. And in this chapter, they open up by talking about Marilyn Monroe, and they mention how she had issues with her parents. They mention there's a family history of mental health problems. They mention that she was reported to have been sexually assaulted at a young age. They mention that she struggled with addiction and a whole host of other problems. And then they talk about her tragic death. They mention that her life was difficult, but instead of using her story as an opportunity to talk about, things that we as a society could do better, like providing better social care for kids, providing better support for people with mental health issues, instead of talking about how, society as a whole puts so much pressure on people, especially like celebrities, and, all these important topics. Instead of that, they just do a bit of victim blaming. Instead of saying, this is how society failed her, this is how we can do better in the future, they say, where did Marilyn's life take its first wrong turn? It most likely happened where many of us take our first wrong turn. It started the moment she allowed the culture to define her womanhood. The moment culture's ideas filled her checklist. The moment God's design for femininity was dismissed from her vocabulary. So basically, it's all because she did something wrong. Not that she was in these horrific circumstances, it's all her fault, clearly. She wasn't Christian enough, she wasn't good enough, she wasn't pure enough. And this is her fault because she decided not to be. So her tragic life, all her fault, apparently. It's gross. I appreciate that they're trying to talk about the pressures that society as a whole puts on women and why that's damaging. That's a really, really important topic to talk about and cover. And it's important that women feel empowered enough and strong enough to say, I can change my life, I can take control of this, I can change what's happening to me. That's also important. But to put the blame on a person for anything bad that happens to them because they allowed it to happen, or they didn't pray hard enough, or they didn't whatever, like putting the blame entirely on the victim isn't okay. If she was sexually assaulted at a young age, that's not her fault. She didn't just need to pray a little bit harder and that trauma's just gonna go away. Like that's not how it works. Also, I think I read a thing on Reddit the other day about how people have read I think it was extracts from her diary and all this stuff like this, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest she may have actually been an asexual lesbian. So basically, she probably felt incredibly out of place being treated like a sex object by so many men and in her career and all this kind of thing. So yeah, I can also understand why she struggled there as well. And it's not because a woman being a sexual being is inherently bad, it's because it was bad for her because she wasn't in control of her sexuality. She was treated as an object. She wasn't allowed to express her sexuality with the people she wanted to. She was forced to perform for men like a toy. She was forced to be sexual when she maybe felt more asexual. This is where the issues are. It's not that being sexual is inherently bad, like Girl Defined are trying to say. It's that they forced the wrong person to do it, and it was forced, and all these other things. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Basically, they're taking a tragedy and using it to push their own twisted agenda and completely kind of missing the point and the actual lessons and takeaways that we could take from this and grow and learn and improve with. Does that make sense? Anyway, then they finally stop talking about her and they move on to talk about their own childhood. Now they were homeschooled, and they had this big group of friends from church. And then they start complaining about how, as high school came to a close, our roads began to part. One by one, our friends dropped off the radar. And we don't mean to say the staying in touch radar. We're talking about the Christian radar. We watched some of our godliest friends turn into complete atheists. We saw other friends reject purity and dive headfirst into sexual relationships. Some got married and then quickly divorced. A couple of single friends got pregnant out of wedlock. We also witnessed quiet friends turn into raunchy party animals. As the years went on, many of our friends continued dropping off the Christian radar. They no longer embraced biblical femininity. We'll dive into what that looks like later. Instead, they slowly transformed into culture-defined girls. Sadly, the passion for God they had in high school became extinct from their lives. They no longer talked, acted, or looked like Christian girls. Their lives didn't reflect the joy, peace, order, purity, and holiness of God. From that large group of 30, we can count on one hand the girls who are still walking with God, the girls who still care about biblical values, the girls who still use the Bible as their standard for truth. This shocking epidemic deeply concerns us. What happened to our friends? What went wrong? Funny how this shocking epidemic concerns you, but not the actual shocking epidemic that's going on because you're still hosting conferences, which could get people killed. Funny that, isn't it? Maybe sort your priorities out there, yeah? One by one, many of our friends bought into the alluring lies. They wanted something new, something more. Little by little, they stopped looking to God for their identity. They stopped asking him what he thought. They stopped believing his truths. It started the first time they looked to something other than God for their happiness. Awful, terrible, bad people. I've got to say though, like, for all they talk about like their friends like this, and we will touch on this a little more in a second as we jump into chapter 3, for all they say stuff like, you know, some friends got married and then divorced, some had sexual relationships, some got pregnant, some turned into raunchy party animals. I don't actually see anything bad here. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of this. There's nothing to say these women are unhappy. There's nothing to say they're doing anything to damage their health. There's nothing worrying about this. It's not like they all just suddenly turned into meth addicts. It's not like they all just got a bunch of STDs. It's not like a bunch of them were all sexually assaulted or turned into murderers or rapists or whatever. Like, they just sound like normal women who are figuring out what makes them as individuals happy. There's nothing to say they're unhappy or unfulfilled. They're just living a different life to you. There's nothing shocking or bad here. I don't get it. And we see this more in chapter 3, which is called Counterfeit Femininity. You've done me wrong. And in this, we hear about the story of Katie Jones, who was basically like this popular girl that they knew from like when they were teenagers or something. They said, it's a very specific example, and I hope they haven't used this woman's real name, because if so, horrible. So they say that they were jealous of her growing up, and now she has a very different lifestyle to them, and they speak about her with such disdain and disgust and kind of pity her, which is weird as well. And it's like they're trying to make an example of her, and it's all very weird because I don't see any evidence, like those other girls we just mentioned, that her life is bad or that she's miserable or unhappy. So let me read you an abridged version of Katie's story and see if you can find anything wrong with her, because I can't. Fast forward 10 years to now. Katie is still very independent. She appears confident. She's still on top of all the fashion trends. To the public eye, she looks put together, but behind the scenes, she's falling apart. Katie married her high school sweetheart in the midst of pursuing her college degree. Less than 1 year into her marriage, Katie regretted her decision. Settling into married life with a husband attempting to lead her wasn't quite what she'd expected. As the second year of marriage rolled around, Katie shocked us all. She left her husband and demanded a divorce. Shortly after her divorce, Katie entered the party scene. She quickly found a new man who was enamored by her independent spirit and sexy outfits. The last time I saw Katie Jones, she was 8 months pregnant, working as a full-time waitress, partying on the weekends, and living with the boyfriend who got her pregnant. She was the girl who appeared to have it all. She was the woman, and now her life is filled with dysfunction and heartache. Where is this dysfunction and heartache? Where is this awful life? She left a man who wasn't making her happy, who she clearly rushed into a marriage with. She found a man who she is happy with, who, you've said it yourself, is enamored by her, clearly, probably loves her. She moved in with him, she's starting a family with him, she has a full-time job. She sounds pretty damn content to me. Where is this dysfunction and heartache? They claim she only appears confident on the outside, but it sounds to me like maybe she actually is, because I see no evidence to the contrary. I can't help but think that Kristen and Bethany are just seeing what they want to see here. This is the absolute perfect example of, well, I wouldn't be happy in that situation, so clearly she mustn't be either. You know, it's a blatant misunderstanding of the fact that different things make different people happy. I don't know how they can't see this by now. They're old enough. They're like, what, early 30s now? They should know. Well, actually, no, they were probably like my age when they wrote this, but they should know this, and they should have known this when they wrote this. I mean, like, I know I would not be happy if I had the lives that Kristen and Bethany had. Like, the whole, like, marriage and kids and preaching and going to church thing would make me miserable. I know this. But I can look at their lives and say, that's not for me, but still understand that it makes them happy and makes them fulfilled. And I'd never, like, tell them they shouldn't be doing that because it works for them, you know? And then they turn this Katie story into a thing about how, you know, modern womanhood, as they call it, is this, like, terrible thing. And they say, the last time Bethany and I went to the grocery store, I noticed something. Every magazine cover was filled with images of beautiful, confident, fashionable, and sexy women who reminded me of Katie Jones. Again, these all seem like great traits and good things, so where's the problem? Why is this a bad thing? I mean, we could say a hell of a lot about, like, magazine covers and stuff and how damaging they can be, and, you know, the perils of too much Photoshop and all this kind of thing and unrealistic expectations. I get that. But I think the least of our worries is magazine covers showing confident women. What do you want? Timid women who are like, I'm only here because my husband told me I could. Is that who our role models should be? They go on and say, modern femininity, according to celebrity idols, is about looking sexy, exuding confidence, and remaining independent of men. If we follow in their footsteps, we'll find the happiness and fulfillment we desire. Right? After looking over such magazines, it becomes clear that every woman is after the same thing. We all want happiness. We all want fulfillment. We all want security. We all want to feel loved. The problem is getting there. How do we as women obtain these things? I think this is more of a human thing than a woman thing. I mean, doesn't everyone want to feel secure and fulfilled and to love and be loved? I think that's just a person thing, you know. But like they're saying, you know, like, how do we get those things? We have to remember, like the shampoo analogy, it's not just one size fits all. You can't just hand out the same shampoo to every person and expect them to find happiness and fulfillment. Each person needs a different shampoo to get there. And so with this in mind, we get to the backbone of the book, which is where they say, Katie Jones adopted what the two of us call the 3 pillars of counterfeit femininity. These 3 pillars are the core of our culture's version of femininity. And so basically these are 3 things that Girl Defined are trying to combat in this book. They're the 3 values that they think too many women care about today, and we all need to stop. And so we're very quickly going to look at what these are. Pillar 1 in their mind is liberation. And they write, liberation has one underlying theme: to throw off the old-fashioned idea that men and women have differing roles and unique purposes. Liberation is about women being free. Because yes, we all know that freedom is bad, because how can a man control a free woman? Weren't things better in the good old days when women were just property to be bought and sold like cattle? Moo. Free from what? Primarily free from roles in marriage, free from the differences between men and women, free from the Bible's teachings on gender, free from anything that distinguishes what it means to be male and what it means to be female. Sounds pretty great to me. One dictionary defines the word liberation as the removal of traditional social or sexual rules and attitudes, etc. Which is funny because the dictionary I read gave the definition for liberation as the action of setting someone free from imprisonment, slavery, or oppression. But I guess they didn't want to go down the pro-slavery route too early in the book. I'll leave that for the later chapters, you know. Instead, they write using their definition of liberation. We translate that to mean out with the old, in with the new. This is the 21st century. Women shouldn't be tied down to traditional rules, which, yeah, I agree with. They actually, I know they're being sarcastic, but they actually shouldn't. And notice the key word there is shouldn't or tied down. It's not saying women can't have traditional values. It's not saying women can't live by traditional values. It's saying women shouldn't have to if they don't want to. Women shouldn't be tied into it. Women shouldn't be forced into it. Women can if they want, and I'm sure some women will if they want, but they shouldn't have to. That's the difference, and that's what Girl Defined ignore. On purpose, I think. They go on to say, liberation pushes the idea that to be equal with men, women need to have the same purpose as men. That's not true at all. We need to accomplish the same things. Not true at all. We need to pursue the same lifestyle. Only then, when the gender lines are merged, will we be truly satisfied. Again, no, they're completely misunderstanding. Feminism liberation is about equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. We're not saying every person has to do the same thing and achieve the same things and want the same things. We're saying every person should be allowed to have the opportunity to do what they want if it makes them happy. For example, a woman can apply for the same jobs as men. A woman can have the same economic freedom as a man. A woman can have the same sexual freedom as a man without being judged and slut-shamed. A woman can do anything a man can if she wants to. And a man can do anything a woman can if he wants to. It's about allowing people opportunities. Freedom of opportunity, not forcing people into the same outcome. That's the difference. Bethany tells a really bizarre story to exemplify this whole anti-liberation thing, and it's just very odd. Again, let me give you an abridged version. So my friend Brandon and I were hanging out, and I got on the topic of my current ministry projects and goals. I was very into my ministry projects. They are my pride and joy. I had convinced myself that my ministry accomplishments were the source of my purpose and fulfillment as a woman. I looked around at married women and thought, I can't imagine being just a wife and mother. I can't imagine not having something else, not accomplishing something bigger, something better. I didn't say that out loud, but I thought it in my head. I felt it in my heart. Now imagine what happened when Brandon asked me, do you think you could be happy as a wife and mother? Would you be willing to give up some of your ministry projects in the future if you needed to? Wow, not a cool question. I spun around in my swivel chair, looked him in the eyes, and in my feistiest tone said, I really can't imagine my life without my ministry and book projects. I hope that whoever I marry will be supportive of my unique gifts and talents. And if that was the whole story, I'd be like, yes, you go, girl. You're going after what makes you happy in life. You're feeling fulfilled. You've got this. You're not ruling out the wife and mother thing, but you're saying you want more. You know what you want. You're standing up to this man. Great story. Love it. But it doesn't end there. This is where she ruins it. She says, Brandon's questions caused me to do some serious thinking. I waded through the questions like, why am I so defensive of my accomplishments? Why do I feel the need to prove myself to those around me? Why do I feel being a wife and mother isn't good enough? Why do I feel so restless and discontent? After several weeks of soul searching, I realized the truth. My ministry wasn't the problem. Brandon wasn't the problem. My job wasn't the problem. My goals weren't the problem. It was my heart. Somewhere along the way, I had come to accept aspects of the first pillar of counterfeit femininity, liberation. I wanted to be praised. As a result, I pursued opportunities that would get me the applause I was craving. The crazy thing was that the praise didn't make me happy. In fact, I was quite frustrated. I was on edge. I was ready to prove my worth to those around me. I acted high and mighty towards men. I was an unhappy mess packaged in spiritual wrapping paper. The conversation I had with Brandon caused me to do some serious soul searching. It made me humble myself and evaluate my heart. It was then I realized I wasn't shooting at the right target. I was embracing aspects of liberation. I just don't even know what to say to this or what to think of it. It's just very bizarre. The levels of dysfunction here. Let me know your thoughts on that. Moving on to pillar 2, and it's quite similar. Apparently this is independence, so women shouldn't be independent is what they're saying. They say, whether you're currently married or single, our culture is pressuring you to to attain an unhealthy level of independence. You're encouraged to separate yourself from your parents, from your family, from your husband, and from your children. You're encouraged to pursue what you want when you want it. Shove everyone aside because you come first. Who is saying this? Who? And once again, it's these weird false equivalencies. Independence is not synonymous with selfishness, and it's wrong to imply that it is. Again, it's about having a choice. It's saying you can be independent if you want. You don't have to rely on a man or your family. You don't have to be passed around like a piece of property. You don't have to be sold off in marriage anymore if you don't want. But equally, if you do want a partner and you do want to be a team, or you do want to like sit close with your family and all that stuff, you can do that too. That's still allowed. No one's stopping you. It's just offering up opportunities if people want them. And you can be independent in some aspects of your life and not others. It's not a, all or nothing situation. You can pick and choose where you want to be independent and where you need some help. Like, this is okay. It's a very bizarre thing to be mad about, women having independence. It's very odd. This time it's Kristen who gives us a story explaining why independence is wrong. But it's a very, very bizarre example because it's not independence she's displaying in this story. It's quite the opposite. And it's also immaturity and being financially irresponsible. Maybe if she had a little more independence before getting married, she wouldn't have had these issues that she has in this story. Let me read you again an abridged version and tell me what you think. Growing up, I was the epitome of the word competitive. As I grew into a woman, my competitive attitude started to morph into something different, something more distinct, something that became very apparent as I began my relationship with Jack, who is now my husband. It was an attitude of independence, an attitude of I've got this, I don't need you. Early in my marriage, my independent spirit reared its ugly head on a regular basis. I remember one specific time when Zach and I had been married for only 6 months. We were living in an adorable one-bedroom apartment, sharing the same car and following the same budget. Zach and I both agreed that he would be in charge of managing our family budget. I can't stand managing budgets. He came up with a plan and showed it to me. I was pleasantly surprised when he allotted me a generous amount of spending money and gladly accepted. Well, several weeks later, he realised that our budget was out of balance and we would both need to cut back on our spending. Wait, I can only spend how much? I asked in a defiant tone. Look, babe, I'm really sorry. I would give you all the money in the world if I could, he replied. We just don't have it in our budget right now. I gave him a cold stare. Well, how am I supposed to buy what I need? I don't want to be so restricted and tied down, I said, holding one hand in the air. The whole idea of sharing everything didn't seem so romantic anymore. I wanted the freedom to do what I wanted when I wanted. In that moment, being independent seemed a lot more appealing to me. I had no idea how independent my spirit was until I put it to the test. This isn't independence. This is being a petulant child who's irresponsible with money. I just have no words. I don't understand. And the one final thing that Kristen and Bethany hate women having is Pillar 3, sexual freedom. They write, even as, you can tell I'm getting kind of fed up of this now, can't you? This book is exhausting, sorry. Even as Christian girls growing up in a Christian family with awesome Christian parents, the pressure to be sexually loose was intense. We wanted to be liked and accepted. We wanted to be beautiful. We imitated the famous women in the spotlight in hopes of finding the security and value we longed for. And then they complain about how society's idea of sexual freedom was being shoved in our faces because their friends wore bikinis and they didn't want to. As teens, we were pressured by the media to live up to a sexualized version of womanhood. As young women, we were pressured to use our freedom and flaunt our bodies. Don't let them go to waste, was the stranger's advice. We live in a sex-saturated culture. It's impossible to completely avoid it. We are bombarded with misguided messages of sexual freedom while performing some of the most basic activities in life, like going to a grocery or clothing store. And I absolutely agree that often society, especially Western society, sexualizes girls far too young, and that is creepy. Absolutely, it's not okay. That is something to talk about and discuss and try and change and combat. That's fine. But at the same time, it's not okay to go to the opposite extreme and make women feel ashamed of their sexuality and make them try and suppress it, to kind of ignore it and pretend it's not there and isn't gonna grow and be a part of them. The whole point of sexual freedom is the freedom part. It's about having a choice. You know, it's saying that when you're an adult, be with as many people as you want, be with whatever kind of people you want, you know, do whatever makes you happy. And by, you know, as many as you want and whoever, this can absolutely mean none and no one if you want. That is okay. That's where the freedom and the choice part comes in, because it's not saying be with as many as you want and therefore it has to be 100 men. It's saying be with as many as you want, and that means whether it's 0 or 1 or 10 or 100, it's your business as long as you're safe and it's consensual and you're not hurting anyone. It's all good. We need to remove the stigma around the act of sex itself and instead focus on talking about the important issues like consent and like educating people about safe sex and all that kind of stuff, rather than shaming them for being sexual beings. They complain about what women are taught today, saying that women are taught that real women aren't ashamed of their bodies. Real women are confident in showing it all. Real women value their sexual freedom. And I know they're being sarcastic here, but can we just please forget about this idea of real women and what makes a real woman? Because they talk about it so much in this book, and like real women, real femininity, you know, can we just forget that and stop that? And, you know, the happiest women find confidence by dressing how they want and for themselves, not for anyone else. They find happiness by being comfortable presenting how they want. They find happiness for choosing if and when they want to show off or cover up or whatever. The happiest women find it by understanding their own sexuality and their own limits and not being defined by anyone else's standards. That's what makes a happy woman, not by being a real woman or real femininity or all that rubbish stuff, you know? Kristen and Bethany have the right idea to some extent by saying, you know, don't conform to society's standards if you're not into it. But then they lose me by following that up by saying, you know, because it will be wrong for you, because society's standards are wrong for everyone and you must replace it with this whole other specific set of someone else's beliefs. That's where they lose me. They go on to write that the third pillar, sexual freedom, pushes women towards one thing: proving their worth with their bodies. Counterfeit Femininity says that real women are sexy, hot, free, edgy, and wild. If sexual freedom is so beneficial, then why isn't it proving itself that way? Why are women still struggling with feelings of worthlessness? Because sexuality isn't the only thing that provides us with feelings of worth. Life and happiness and fulfillment is so much more complicated than that. A woman can feel fulfilled in one aspect of her life and not others. It's a person can. I don't know why I'm saying woman here. This applies to everyone, absolutely everyone. And maybe people aren't feeling worthless because they have sexual freedom, but they're feeling worthless because people like you are slut-shaming them because of it. Maybe they feel bad because of your actions, not because of their own. Thought about that? Finally, they conclude by saying, personally, neither of us have liked the results that Counterfeit Femininity produced in our lives. It never satisfied us or delivered what it had promised. Women all across the world are experiencing the same thing. They built their lives on the foundation of Counterfeit Femininity and are unhappy with the results. Keyword there is personally. This is fine for you, as in Kristen and Bethany. You figured out what makes you two happy and what makes you two fulfilled and what you two want. That's what's right for you, but it's not right for everyone. You can say that you choose to not be liberated and free and independent, but honestly, you can choose that because you are liberated and free and independent. You actually have the choice, even if you don't realize it. And you have feminism to thank for that. The fact that you can even write this book is thanks to feminism. It's because you are free and liberated and independent, and you are damn lucky. I have personally been in an abusive relationship where I have my independence and freedom and confidence and a whole host of other things that we apparently don't need taken away from me. And I was miserable. It was hard, but it's made me appreciate those aspects of my life a whole lot more. And I've learned that I do need my independence. I do need my liberation. I do need my sexual freedom and all that other stuff to be happy. And it's when those things are taken away that I start to struggle. Because that's what works for me. That's what's right for me. And I've got to do what's right for me. And Kristen and Bethany have got to do what's right for them. And they've got to understand that every woman, every person has got to do what's right for them and figure it out for themselves. There's not this one standard way of living. And I know I'm going to keep repeating myself saying that, but it's so important to hammer home. It's just the most important thing. So with that in mind, we've reached the end of part 1 of this book, which is the first 3 chapters. In the next video in this series, we're going to be reading part 2, which is titled Getting Back to God's Design. So that sounds like it's going to be intense. But until then, please let me know your thoughts on this video, this first part of the book, on Girl Defined in general. Don't forget to also go follow me on Instagram and Twitch. And if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel for more videos. Also, if you want, it would be great if you want to just like and maybe share the video, drop a comment. All that engagement and good stuff really helps me and my channel. Growth has been a little bit kind of like slow lately, so if you want to kind of like help give me a nice boost, comments are great, liking's great, sharing's great, all that good stuff like I say. I'm rambling now, I'm not very good at this self-promotion thing. Thank you so much for watching today, I appreciate you guys a hell of a lot, and I will see you again in the next video. So, thanks a lot.